10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 260. Hey everybody, welcome into episode 260 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Really happy to have you back for yet another episode. And it's a new month, so that means it's time for a new series. And this month we're going to be taking a look at developing some rhythmic flexibility. And I've got some great, really difficult exercises for you this week. This might be some of the hardest stuff that you may have worked on to this point, but it should really pay off for you. And I'm hoping that you end up with some fantastic results from these next couple of episodes and the exercises contained in them. So as usual, we wanted to let you know that the PDFs are available for this episode and every single episode that we've ever done. And you can get those by supporting us on Patreon. We are a listener-supported podcast. We do not have any advertising on this show. Instead, we lean on regular listeners like yourself to contribute a small amount of money every month to make sure that this podcast keeps coming at you in high quality week after week. And you do get those fantastic benefits. So you can check those out at our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners when you get over there, and it'll bring you over to our platform, Patreon, where you can learn more about all the benefits you will get and hopefully support the show. So I've got some new patrons to thank. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Craig and Jurgen. And thank you to Michael for editing your pledge from $3 up to $5. We really appreciate that. So again, go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, and you get instant access to everything over there. Okay, so let's start talking about the material. So as I mentioned, this might be the hardest exercise that we've done in 260 episodes. And I know that's saying a lot because I have presented you with some pretty difficult exercises in the past, but this one really takes the cake in my opinion. And in fact, I still have a lot of trouble working on this, but this is something that I try to do each and every day, this type of work, trying to get my flexibility up to a level where I can freely express myself when I'm improvising. That means that I don't feel like I'm hamstrung in any way when it comes to rhythm. You know, I can float in between different lengths of notes, and whatever I'm trying to say through my instrument, ultimately there's not like a filter between what I want to do and what I can do. That's the ultimate goal for everything that we practice. Now, one note about this material, it's really easy to only work on, let's say, vocabulary or getting your bebop skills happening. That stuff provides us with some instant gratification, meaning that when we're practicing a super hip bebop line, it sounds super hip right away. And we are sort of encouraged to keep practicing it because we see these instant results. The notes coming out of our instrument sound great right away. These exercises that I'm going to introduce you to starting this week, they don't sound like uber hip right off the bat, but I do think that they actually provide more value to you in the long run. So these are the types of exercises that, first of all, you're going to struggle with. And second of all, it's not going to sound like pulling a Charlie Parker line out of a solo and instantly sounding great. So you've got to hang in there with this stuff, and you've got to really commit yourself to working on these exercises that I'm going to show you in the next couple weeks. So I just wanted to give a little preamble to that, let you know you can expect to struggle with this stuff, and let you know to keep at this, okay? Don't give up if you fail or if you don't like the way that it sounds. This is going to pay off. I promise you. This has helped my playing so much. All right. So let's pull out the PDFs. I want you to take a look And the first thing you're going to notice is that this is a pretty extended exercise. Usually I give you just like a couple of lines music, a couple of measures. This one takes up 2 pages, and at first it's going to look like a lot, and it's not really going to look like it makes sense. So let's go into what is actually going on here. So what I've done is I've written a little bebop line, a little 4-measure bebop line over an F major 7 chord, a concert F major 7 chord. And you'll notice that it's all eighth notes. Pretty standard bebop line, contains a lot of chromaticism, some enclosures, just a nice sounding line. Now, the thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this line and we're going to manipulate the length of the notes. So it starts really, really straight up with just eighth notes. Then you will notice that I'm going to the next rhythmic value up from eighth notes, the next slowest rhythmic value. So that would be quarter note triplets. So you're going to notice the next 4 measures are the exact same line, but I'm using exclusively quarter note triplets. Then you'll notice the line after that, starting in measure 10, is all straight up quarter notes. So now we are doubling the length of the line, and we're lengthening those notes. So far we have eighth notes, quarter note triplets, quarter notes. Then you're going to notice the next set, starting in measure 17, is going to be dotted quarter notes. And I've changed every single note in the line to a dotted quarter note. Here is where it starts to get really complicated and where you might start having a lot of trouble. Because what you're going to notice is that the notes don't line up to the measure anymore. It's not nicely contained and everything's predictable. When we start using those dotted quarter notes, we start seeing the notes land on basically every eighth note in the measure, right? And this is where it starts to get tricky. You have to have a real awareness of where you are in the measure. Then after this, in measure 27, you'll notice that I suddenly go to half notes. So the next rhythmic value up. And then what you'll notice in measure 40 is I'm playing the same line. Now I'm using dotted half notes. So before I go any further talking about some of the difficulties that are going to come along with this, I want you to hear it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it in 2 ways. One, I'm going to play with just a metronome, and you're going to notice that I'm playing really fast. I'm playing at 200 BPM, and I think that these exercises work a little bit better faster, okay? But take your time, you know what I mean? Work your way up to that 200. It's just when the notes get longer, there's less value in going slow. So you're going to notice that the metronome is clicking on beat 1 and beat 3, and that's giving me a little bit more of a open feeling when I'm playing with the metronome, but it's also a little bit harder to do, so it's kind of a double whammy. But you will notice that the metronome is beating on 1 and 3, and I'm going right through all 2 pages of the exercise without stopping. And this is the real hard part. Can you play everything without stopping in between? Can you make that transition from one rhythmic value to the next without having to stop and think about it? And at first, you may have to stop and think about it. But enough of me talking. Let's hear the exercise with just the metronome. Follow along on your PDF and hear how the rhythmic scheme completely changes when we up the value of the note. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear that's quite a long exercise, and it's going to take a lot to get through the entire thing. Don't expect to be able to do it right away. One thing that I will caution you against is after you feel like you can do those dotted quarters, that's really going to be the first thing that gets you. You're going to feel like, okay, I've got the dotted quarters, I'm home free. Then you're going to get to those dotted half notes, and it's going to be really, really hard again, maybe even harder than the dotted quarters. The beauty of doing it with the metronome is that you really can hear where the downbeat is of each measure. And that would be the big thing that I would want you to think about when you're playing this. In fact, you could even set your metronome so that there's a different sound click on the downbeat. So it could be like a high-pitched click on the downbeat and then a different click on beat 3. That can really help with this. It really, really will make a huge difference. But if you know where that downbeat is, you can really check in on yourself every couple of measures, right? Like when you're doing the eighth notes and the quarter notes and the half notes, it's going to be kind of a time to rest a little bit. It's those in-between ones, the triplets, and then the dotted quarters, and then the dotted halves. That's where you're really going to have to concentrate and think about, okay, are my downbeats hitting when they're supposed to be? Because what you will notice is that when we're doing the dotted quarter notes, every once in a while, you will land square on a downbeat. So obviously in measure 17, you start on a downbeat. And then if you look at measure 20, you're landing on a downbeat again there. And then everything sort of goes haywire again. And then in measure 23, a downbeat again. So that's kind of the way to keep yourself honest, is concentrate on the downbeat. Are you playing with the metronome on the downbeat when you're supposed to be? That's a good way to create a little bit of accountability and make sure that you're not just thinking that you're doing the right thing and that you're playing the rhythm perfectly. But then if you really were to match it up with the metronome, you're not, right? And again, this is really difficult, so take your time. So that's what I want you to work on this week. Next week, we're going to talk about doing the same exercise with a backing track. That's literally just playing concert F major 7 the entire time, and how much more difficult that makes it, and the things you have to think about when it comes to playing with a rhythm section that's accenting different beats and not just playing with that metronome that's telling you clearly, here is the downbeat and beat 3. So take care of this first part of the exercise first, and then you'll be ready for next week. Again, you do not have to start by doing this at 200. If you want to do it a lot slower, go for it. It's just going to take longer to play, and the longer notes are going to feel a little bit laborious, but that's okay. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. All right? And then eventually try to work your way up to anything over 150 would be great, in my opinion. So prepare for this to be one of the most difficult things that you've ever worked on. Prepare for it to be really, really frustrating in a lot of cases, but just trust the process that this is going to be so good for you. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always get in touch with me on the community Facebook group, or you can email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. Do not hesitate to reach out, or you can get in touch with me on Patreon for all your Patreon members. And remember, you can get the PDF to this that's going to spell out everything that we've talked about. You can find that on 10minutejazzlesson.com and click on one of the Patreon banners. Very easy process to get signed up. And thank you to all of our patrons for making this show possible. So have fun with this. As frustrating as it is, just try to have some fun with it. And then we're going to work our way through this exercise in a couple different ways this month. All right. Hope you're all doing well out there, staying safe and healthy. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Talk to you soon. Bye.